District Court Judge Tanya Chutkan announced, and this is a bombshell for the election, that the federal trial of former President Donald Trump on charges related to his attempt to steal the 2020 election will be delayed indefinitely while the appeal goes through for his claim of absolute presidential immunity. Basically, he can do whatever he wants, and thus the charges need to be dismissed. So we don't know. It was supposed to be on March 4th, and now it's been delayed. Now, interestingly, on that appeal, the DC Circuit Court of Appeals heard arguments in relation to that claim of absolute immunity back on January 9th, which is a span of time in the past that I would define, I think in legal terms, as a whole hell of a long time ago. But despite that, they have not yet issued an opinion. They have not laid out any schedule for when they would issue an opinion. And I would just remind you that the special counsel attempted to get ahead of this by asking the Supreme Court to weigh in and just take up the absolute immunity thing. They declined to do that, interestingly. So now we're waiting on the appeals process. And of course, regardless of what they end up deciding, it's gonna have to go to the Supreme Court anyway. So it's interesting that they added this roadblock, and now we have no idea when we're gonna move forward. And since this is perhaps the most serious of all of the charges facing Donald Trump, and it's the most important case for the voters to have some clarity on, this is a massive shift to the election. I want to start with you, Mark. What do you think about this? I mean, we literally may not know until after the election.
I think it's clear. I mean, it's clear that we won't have any clarity on this. And sadly, this absurdist notion that the president could have absolute immunity, I mean, it's just, on its face, it's ridiculous, right? And yet, the courts are dignifying it long enough and delaying such that we really are going to see probably Trump avoid really answering and facing the music on this issue. Again, it's sad because of its absurdity, I think, more than anything else.
Brett.
Listen, I am just so disappointed that I'll have to wait indefinitely to find out whether Donald Trump is a piece of turd. You know what I mean? Like, here's the thing: is the whole idea of the chronology of all of this was that this originally was supposed to start this trial on March 4th, and March 5th was Super Tuesday. And the argument against having it start on March 4th or happen at all in the prelude to the actual general election was a lot of people were like, oh, this is a political move intended to make Donald Trump seem like a criminal. Basically, it's a perp walk. It's the equivalent of having a mug shot. But we already have those things, is my argument. Everybody who's going to be affected by whether Donald Trump is in like legal jeopardy or not, like if you haven't made your mind up on this, I just don't see how you would change your mind.
I think, look, I would take your everyone and I would add almost everyone. Probably way too many everyone, but not everyone. I think that in an election that could be determined by 10,000 votes here, 5,000 votes there, I think it's the sort of thing that we can't totally write off as possibly influencing the outcome. And I would also remind everyone, in terms of stakes, the stakes are not just how it might influence the election. And I would say that, look, we're tapped into all of this. Obviously, we have a bias in how we want this thing to go. But the American people deserve to know what evidence the special counsel has put together. There's all sorts of things that could be, could condemn him or could be exculpatory. I don't know, but they deserve to know. But the stakes are also the trial itself. Because if it isn't wrapped up by inauguration, if Trump does get back in office, then there's not gonna be a trial. He's just gonna snap his fingers, it's done, and he will have, in effect, gained the absolute immunity that he desires so much.
That's a really interesting point that John is making, the notion that somehow he can just seize it and do what he wants and have the courts work it out later. So if it's not resolved in courts ahead of time, then Trump can just act on the assumption that it's okay, let them litigate it if they don't think I can get away with this. I know Jack Smith tried to go to the Supreme Court and leapfrog this process, which was smart, okay? But Jack Smith, if I can just spend a second on him, he, I think, really made a huge error when he had the documents case go to Florida, because that's one that you could easily, I think John's right when he talks about the J6 case is the most significant on some level, and this immunity case is massive. But the documents case is easy for voters to get their heads around. Like, what was this guy doing with all these documents? So many, I mean, in bathrooms, in ballrooms, et cetera. And I mention this because that, I think, would have an effect on the election. And I think you could have brought about a speedy trial there were it not for the fact that Jack Smith chose Florida as the venue there. So I would have hoped that he would have, as smartly as he leapfrogged to the Supreme Court, I wish he would have made the smart notion of trying that case in Washington where it should have been tried.
Yeah, he sort of delayed it, and now Chutkan is delaying it after the Supreme Court decided not to take it up. It's just everything seems to be lining up for us to never have clarity on exactly what happened.
And the big loser here is Nikki Haley, who I think is just sticking around in the race to see whether Trump goes to jail first.
Yeah, it's not good news for her. That's certainly the case.
Thanks for watching. If you become a member, you get to watch all this ad-free, except for, of course, this ad. Still, hit the join button below.